Records I've seen here at the Montgomery County Jail show that Mrs. McDaniel is charged with 6 violations. They include 1 violation of the Alabama Ethics Act, 2 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of false pretense, and 1 count of using her office as PSC president for personal gain. Mrs. McDaniel is reported by sources close to the investigation to have been indicted partially on charges that she allegedly charged the state of Alabama for expenses at a Biloxi, Mississippi hotel that had already been paid by independent telephone companies. She is expected to go to court on these charges on August 8th. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Jail. Records I've seen here at the Montgomery County Jail show that Mrs. McDaniel is charged with 6 violations. They include 1 violation of the Alabama Ethics Act, 2 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of false pretense, and 1 count of using her office as PSC president for personal gain.
The indictments charge that Mrs. McDaniel used false pretense and violated 5 other state laws when she allegedly received $200.05 after filing a false expense voucher for an out-of-state trip. The trip occurred in July of 1977 and was to Biloxi, Mississippi to attend a seminar for telephone management personnel. The grand jury charges that her expenses were paid by sponsors of the seminar and that she returned to Alabama and filed 1 voucher that was $119 more than she should have received, and that she illegally received $80 from another voucher filed for the same trip. It was a Biloxi, Mississippi hotel bill that the jury says Mrs. McDaniel allegedly twice received payment for. The 6 separate indictments came after months of investigation by the Montgomery County Grand Jury into the affairs of Mrs. McDaniel during her tenure as PSC president. Mrs. McDaniel resigned last year. She said at that time that she was stepping down because of personal reasons and her mother's ill health. Law enforcement sources say the charges against Mrs. McDaniel were filed shortly before the 3-year statute of limitations would have made any attempt at prosecution impossible.
She is expected to go to court on these charges on August 8th. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Jail.
Cigarette wholesalers have been working furiously to complete an inventory on their stock, since all unsold cigarettes, even if they were purchased by stores before today, are being taxed at the new rate. Most wholesalers had the new stamps on their inventory for today's sales. Before, tax on a pack of cigarettes in Alabama was 12 cents. Now it's 16 cents. And the State Revenue Department has already mailed out reporting forms to all cigarette wholesalers and retailers for them to declare their taxes, including the new levy. However, a Revenue Department spokesman says some retailers and wholesalers have failed to respond to the recently mailed tax forms, and officials say failure to comply will result in a Revenue Department investigation. We saw varying cigarette prices, ranging from a low of 65 cents to a high of 85 cents per package. We spoke with one retailer who said she is still selling cigarettes at the old price and has not been charging the additional 4 cents. Finally, we talked with some cigarette smokers concerning the new price increase.
But I don't see how the poor people is going to afford it.
You think it'll prohibit some people from smoking?
I guess all of us are going to have to quit smoking now.
I tell you, one of the American people is taxed too much now.
Whether or not they go up or down, I'm going to keep buying them. So it doesn't really matter, I don't guess. I don't like it, but there's not much you can do about it either.
Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The music you're hearing is the theme song from the blockbuster movie The Empire Strikes Back. It's available only in the new 10-inch record size. Now, a 10-inch 4-song record may seem odd to some people, but the smaller size agrees with those who enjoy paying a smaller price. And while record companies stand to profit from the new size discs, there's another reason behind marketing the 10-inchers.
One of the main reasons was to expose consumers to new artists like the Propaganda, the New Music, and the Continentals. That was their first album, and the Cheap Trick didn't have a new album ready yet, and they had a song on the roadie soundtrack, so they included the 45 inside it. With the Miko, I believe they didn't have a new album ready yet, so they went ahead and released a 10-inch version, which has been selling real well since we got it in last week.
Big-name artists usually wait a few years between albums. Drummond feels the 10-inch records would help keep the artist's name in the limelight and continue to sell. Right now, sales are slow, but if top-name artists get into the 10-inch record business, those smaller discs with the big hits and low prices may be music to your ears. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Now you got a bite on it.
Man, man.
I guarantee that old man didn't.
Well, I know the dude on account of the fire. How you doing? I see thing. Somewhere down the line.
The 13-member task force is supposed to come up with suggestions on improvements for Alabama's higher education system. It includes administrators and board members from several institutions, as well as some state officers. Chairman Sid McDonald says the committee's decision 3 weeks ago to close the meetings still stands.
The decision on the executive session has been made. It was made at our very earliest meetings. It is still the wishes of the group that we meet in the executive session, so nothing will change, and I'm sorry.
I'd like for you to go on record as showing that I oppose your secret meetings or closed sessions, and I'd also like to show you an Attorney General's opinion we have that we feel...
It is not applicable to this kind of advisory committee.
I believe it is, sir.
We believe it's not.
The opinion says that it concerns any
committee... I really
committee...
did not give you the floor. We're going to start our meeting now, and I'm sorry.
McDonald asked a Capitol security guard and a state trooper to escort reporters and photographers from the room. He says the committee is not a public one and its purpose is simply to advise. For that reason, McDonald claims the public and the press should not be allowed to attend. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
President, the next item on the agenda, sir.
carries. Ms. Reynolds?
Move that we adopt the resolution.
Motion to adopt the resolution.
Next item on the agenda is application for on-premise beer license by Jimmy Lee Cleveland and Melvin Jones doing business.
Council, we have questions of Mr. Cleveland and Mr. Jones. Need a motion.
President, I move to adopt the resolution.
Motion to adopt the resolution.
Say a beer without club card.
And then voting just then.
8.
Opposed?
1.
Motion carries and the resolution has been adopted. Thank you, sir.
Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Montgomery, Alabama, that Deputy Chief D.R. Tucker be and is hereby appointed to serve.
This is Central Alabama Academy, one of several different private schools in the Montgomery area. Enrollment is down here as it is at some of the other private schools. The school has even been advertising to try to boost enrollment. School officials blame a bad economy on the drop in student attendance. School headmaster John Kaysen says some parents are finding it difficult to afford the tuition, which averages $1,200 a year. The result is a tight budget for the school.
Private schools circumvent themselves around their total enrollment. It circumvents around their budget. In other words, the budget is based on how many students and how much tuition you come in.
Kaysen points out that while enrollments are down, it's not because he's lost students to the public schools.
Basically because there's more one-to-one attention given to a child that might be having some academic problems.
Kaysen says the enrollment of the academy averages 250, but currently that figure is down by 10%. He says if the enrollment does not increase significantly by September, certain adjustments will be made.
When we approach the end of August, we look at the total enrollment at that timing point. And then we readjust our budget for the forthcoming year based on the money that we know that we'll have coming in for that particular year.
While enrollments are down at Central Alabama Academy, it's not alone. Alabama Private School Association officials are predicting a drop in enrollments in all private schools across the state this fall. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
It's estimated there are some 50,000 Alabamians who can trace their roots back to an Indian heritage. Some of those genuine Americans met with Governor James at the state capitol to recognize the state's newest organization, the Alabama Indian Affairs Commission. James says he hopes the Bureau will trigger more activity toward preservation of Alabama's Indian heritage. And he says he's confident that with an official Indian Bureau, Alabama Indians will be able to take advantage of federal programs and grants which haven't been used fully in the past. A 14-member commission will oversee Bureau operations. Indian Affairs Commission Director Jenny Dee says one of the organization's first priorities is establishing a good communications and feedback system. The commission will also assist the Indian community's economic development and promote their right to pursue cultural and religious traditions. Dees is optimistic the 1980 census figures will enable the commission to locate and officially recognize the Indian community of Alabama. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Tommy is, of course, a proven player on defense. He's got, this is normally the situation when a young man is coming pretty much. We won't be a team that can just manhandle a team early in the season. We've got something we'll continue to work Tommy period of competing with our players. We'll just have to wait and see because you can never really anticipate from seeing one.
Well, Phil, coach is doing just fine. I've been visiting with him at least twice a day since he's been in the hospital. They're just running a series of tests on him and regulating his medicine. He is very busy on football. Took him some football magazines up there, and he said he really didn't have time to read them because he was going to be working on his stuff. The lung congestion stuff, and he really has not been back in for a checkup or anything. The doctors have been trying to get him to come in and take a few days to regulate his medicine. By that, they want to test his medicine, give him, try some type of medicines and let it run a couple of days and see evaluate it, right. So that's the reason he's going to stay in, roughly a week in the hospital. From the standpoint of being able to get out today, he can get out today and come here and be at the office and everything. But he knows that football is right around the corner, and he's supposed to go to Kings Island next week for the presentation of the MacArthur Bowl and go to Dallas to be on the ABC and NCAA football tour, which he plans to do next week. So he wants to get this out of the way so the table will be clean. He'll be able to start off football season in fine shape.
No, columnist Jack Anderson is not the person I report to about my financial affairs. I report to the Senate Ethics Committee, to the people of the state of Alabama. And there's no problem. My bills are up to date, paid, and his column generally appears on the funny page of the Washington Post, which is his hometown newspaper, and that's generally where it belongs. It's just innuendo. No merit to that claim at all.
Power company officials say the $30.6 million rate increase granted by the PSC last week is inadequate. In a letter to the PSC, power company officials say the rate increase should have become effective July 29th instead of August 1st. As a result, the power company is calling the PSC rate order arbitrary, unconstitutional, and invalid as applied to the period from July 29th to July 31st.
Its order actually specified those dates to go into effect August the 1st. We're submitting now that is a technical error, and because of that error, that the rates that they're suggesting are not adequate. We're going to court. We contend that because of the inadequacy of that order, we should be allowed to collect the full $122 million, and we're going to file an appeal with the Alabama Supreme Court.
As a result of the error, Conway says the power company will lose about $300,000 during the three-day period. The new rates are not in effect.
I think what the Alabama Power Company is doing is claiming that the PSC order is not effective. The code simply says that the PSC must act some kind of action within the 6-month period, which the action was taken, and if they read the order states that the rates as filed by Alabama Power are found to be excessive and are hereby denied, effective July 28th, which was the last day of the 6-month period. So, and the code says that the orders of the Commission are prima facie reasonable, and so we stand on that grounds that our order is correct.
At the PSC, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
No.
We'll let you,
Officials are calling this year an erratic year for cattle. In the summer directors meeting, Alabama cattlemen were told the number of cattle sold is down about 20% from last year. There's also a big drop in cattle prices, about 25 cents per pound. This situation has resulted in a drastic reduction of cash income for Alabama beef producers. Between 1974 and 1977, Alabama cattlemen were forced to liquidate about a third of the state's beef cattle. At that time, cattlemen faced depressed prices, a drought, the trucker strike, and many just couldn't make enough money from their herds. In 1979, cattlemen started building back up the number of cattle in the state. In fact, reports show a 7% increase in cattle for the first 6 months of the year, and officials were optimistic that cattle sales would also increase. But Executive Vice President of the Alabama Cattlemen's Association, Ham Wilson, says cattlemen have been facing serious economic problems. He says many may go bankrupt because they can't meet rising costs, high interest rates, and a declining income. Another problem is competitive prices with other meats. Consumers are buying more pork and poultry because they are being sold at lower prices. Wilson says the Cattlemen's Association will try to increase the demand for beef through advertising and promotion efforts. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Thank you, Senator Stewart.
Prattville is the subject of several current investigations by the FBI, a federal grand jury, and the state attorney general's office. A controversial time for someone to become mayor, especially someone who's never run for office before. But Gray Price says he likes the challenge. He says he's not a politician, and he plans to study the system before making any changes.
We'll make dadgum sure that we have some sound financial practices going on in that city hall. I guarantee you that. I'm not going to come in there and let something like that go on. And I'm a good detective. You know, I've been in the school business a long time. You have to be a detective to be in the school business. You have to stay on top of things.
He says he'll seek advice from the people. Price also says he'll make some changes in the police department, but he's not yet prepared to say what changes.
I've talked to so many policemen, and most of them are fantastic people, and they're really concerned about this city. And I believe the way the police and the fire department, public servants like that, that's the way the tempo of the city goes. And the police can do so much good for a city, have so much good public relations to help the city and help young people. And I don't think they've been given a chance to do some of these things they want to do. And they're going to have that chance.
Price also wants to help the city improve drainage and sewers, and he's concerned about programs to help Prattville's youth. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Prattville.
This is strictly a judgment decision by the state treasurer. Important point, which I'd like to get reiterated one other time.
Service charge. So we tried that several years ago, maybe had as much as $400,000 or $500,000, saying $15,000 to $20,000. And we feel that this is taxpayers doing the way we need to compensate.
Matching some kind of formula that you
Well,
yourself
when I
use.
first came in, there were several banks that Gene, you can come up here and help me too, that had much that told the prices was state money. And that means a big thing.
This was Gulf State Park last September after Hurricane Frederick wreaked havoc on Alabama's coastline. The park's Lodge Convention Center and 144 resort motel units sustained major damage, and now, almost a year later, no repairs have begun on the center, which is pretty bad news for all parties involved. Tourists are missing the fun and convenience of the facility, while the State Conservation Department is missing the money. The park's beach pavilion has reopened, so has the campground, and the pier is currently undergoing repair. But the motel and convention facilities have remained closed since that fateful September 12th, and the opening of bids to repair the Lodge Convention Center was postponed and repostponed. But they finally opened. Contractors from around the state gave the department bids ranging from $2.6 to more than $3 million. The Conservation Department could award a contract as early as the first week in August. According to a Conservation Department official, available state funds as well as money from other department projects may be transferred to the Gulf Park repair job in order to reopen one of South Alabama's top tourist attractions by next April. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Las Vegas entertainer Wayne Newton will join Miss Mandrell in concert at Auburn's Memorial Coliseum October 3rd, kicking off the weekend to benefit the Alabama Sheriff's Boys and Girls Ranches. Fishing, tennis, and putting tournaments, along with a marathon run, will highlight the next day's activities at Stillwater's Resort on Lake Martin. Barbara's husband, Ken Dudney, will host the tennis tournament, while their son Matthew will host the putting tournament. Golfers would take to the links Sunday on the George Cobb Championship course at Stillwater's. Celebrities the likes of Roger Staubach, Pat Sullivan, Terry Beasley, Freddie Hyatt, Miss Mandrell, and more to be named later will participate in the Sunday golf. Barbara promotes the benefit all over the world while she's making her appearances. August 6th, she's scheduled to be on The Tonight Show, and she plans to use that time to talk about the Boys and Girls Ranches, the benefit, and all of the people who make it successful. And why has the Barbara Mandrell benefit been so successful? Barbara answers that question, relating the story of a man she met after a performance in Louisiana one night.
He said, I appreciate it so much, and he says, I send money every month to the ranches. Now, he was raised there, he grew up there, and he sends money to help other kids. And I think there's no better testimony for what a than what the children themselves think of the upbringing that they have. And I thank God that there are people that care enough to do something like this.
Barbara Mandrell, recording star, wife, and most of all, a person who cares. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The basic reason for the winds of Earth is the great temperature difference between the equator and the poles. Because warm air at the equator rises and cold air at the poles falls, a circulation is created. If the Earth didn't turn, this circulation would give us a constant cold wind from the north. But the Earth does turn, causing these circulating air currents to mix. Mountain ranges and the temperature differences between land and sea make the circulation pattern still more complex. Scientists trying to translate into mathematical equations the various forces affecting the wind want to learn the distinct role played by the Earth's rotation alone. To do this, they use models such as this one, in which an electric current simulating gravity is passed through an oil representing the atmosphere. But this experiment won't work on Earth. The Earth's gravity overpowers the simulated gravity created in the chamber. So the test chamber will ride the shuttle into space. There, scientists expect to learn a great deal about how the wind and weather in general are affected by the spinning of our planet. I'm Dan Atkinson with WeatherBeat.
Robert Lehman is a welding inspector for Brown & Root Construction Company. His friend was one of the owners whose Dodge van was recalled. The van was repaired, but when Lehman inspected the work, he found several mistakes.
They should not have welded it solidly all the way through. They had the welding machine set to the point where they blew holes in the chassis. They also hit the ball joint with electrode, causing the grease retainer to blow out. It shows here where the man struck arcs all over underneath of the chassis, trying to find place for ground. He knew how to weld, but he did not know how to weld this particular job. I believe if the general public takes their vehicle into a Chrysler Corporation, they figure, that's being done by Chrysler, by an authorized dealer, it is being done right.
Chrysler instructions to local dealers specify that the dealer use qualified welders to make the repairs, but some dealers say it's hard to get qualified workers, especially in small markets. They say no certified welder will work for the wages Chrysler pays the dealer to make recall repairs. The instructions also say if a dealer can't find qualified help, he should ask for help from Chrysler's zone office. But the Chrysler district manager for parts and service says that if a dealer called him, he would tell the dealer to hire a qualified welder. And he says if the welder's wages are more than Chrysler Corporation will pay, then the dealer must pay the difference. The district manager says that's part of the dealer's cost of doing business. A representative of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says his agency has okayed the Chrysler procedure for repairing the chassis. And he says if dealers aren't getting the cooperation they need from Chrysler, they should contact the Traffic Safety Administration. But one dealer says he just wishes Chrysler had instructed him to go outside the shop to make the repair, because he says he can't afford to hire outside welders if Chrysler won't reimburse him. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
The head of Auburn University's economics department says he favors a 3-member commission appointed by the governor as opposed to a 7-member elected commission with 1 from each congressional district. Dr. Gene Staniland, serving as a consultant of the committee, says the savings in salaries could be applied to getting professional aid on complex matters. He says there must be better utilization of an administrative law judge and an executive director by the PSC. He says the executive director would be in charge of the entire staff and answerable to the commission. He says the law judge would conduct utility hearings and write opinions. Commissioners would be required to make their views public, which he says would remove the politics from decisions. On the opposite side of the state capitol, David Bronner, Secretary-Treasurer for Alabama's Employees Retirement System, says the state doesn't have a cash management system. Bronner, who served as finance director to Governor Fob James, says the state treasurer should have the power to collect and disperse state money.
There should be only one account, and that should be the treasurer's account. There's absolutely no reason. The governor, when he came here, started closing down accounts, and we closed down probably 30 or 40 of them. But there's still some more out there that need to be closed down, because all the money should reside in her office. There's just no reason to have a pool of funds with Joe Blow downtown at the bank just because it's a federal grant.
A number of Alabama retailers appearing before the committee say they oppose the elimination of the discount they now receive for collecting state sales taxes. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The doctor asked me if I would like to try it, and he said that he felt that it would take the swelling out. And I did. I put it on. It was a clear alcohol substance. And we put it on my thumb, and it burned. It did blister the skin. He told me that it might. I watched the blister before me, and it was almost started to smoke. The swelling actually went down right before my eyes. And I really couldn't believe it. Within 5 or 6 minutes or so, my skin was back to normal. The majority of the swelling was down. It was still tender to some degree. I was able to throw a football the next day and was able to compete that particular Sunday.
The power company was ordered to file the new schedules because the Public Service Commission says the utility didn't comply with the recent order asking for this information.
The power company filed a rate rider where they implemented a surcharge instead of filing the specific schedule of rates. And also, as part of their filing, they filed new rules governing the application of the rates. And these rules had been disallowed in the Commission's order of July 28.
Foy says as presented, the surcharge is more confusing and would make it harder for officials to compute an individual's power bill. But power company officials disagree.
Our contention is that the rates we filed were the only rates that we could file to comply with the order as it was written. And those rates have been filed, and we stand on those rates.
The power company has until August 5th to file the new schedules with the Commission. In the meantime, the surcharge or percentage rates will go into effect. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
2. The governor was airborne about 45 minutes before landing at Alabama's Air National Guard base at Danley Field. Earlier last week, James participated in a few training exercises to prepare for his return flight from Camp Shelby, Mississippi, where he'd spent the day reviewing Alabama's National Guard training units. Perhaps the hardest part of the governor's trip wasn't flying the jet, it was getting out of it. He emerged from the plane looking just like a real pilot, green fatigues and all. It was his first such flight, and he says the actual experience was breathtaking.
We had a smooth flight, up around 15,000 feet. But the maneuverability and the power built into that Phantom jet is really an outstanding weapon. And it was a real thrill to ride in it.
James says his pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Ted Tyus, let him handle the controls for a while. So he says he never worried about using any of the emergency training he'd learned. But he did look a little relieved to be back on solid Alabama ground. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
44 cars lined up here today to try and qualify for the top 20 positions in Sunday's Talladega 500. Up for grabs, the prestige of being the pole sitter and a little extra bread that goes along with that. And the qualifying record set in 1969 by Charlie Glotzbeck, a little better than 199 miles per hour. The pre-race indications today were that Buddy Baker and Benny Parsons were the men to beat. As it turned out, Buddy Baker of Charlotte, North Carolina, in car number 28, rounded the tri-oval at Talladega today at 198.545 miles per hour to claim the pole position. After his qualifying run, I asked Baker if he was at all surprised by his near record-breaking performance.
Well, not really. We ran 198 this morning, and of course it was quite a bit cooler, and we knew that we hadn't fixed the car for qualifying. By doing that, I say, the slicking the body up with the wax and the things that you do for qualifying, and I figured we could run close to that, and it was an awful good run. The car never slipped or anything. It just went around here like it's supposed to.
Alongside Baker on the front row will be Hueytown, Alabama's Neil Bonnet, who qualified second today at a speed of 197.175 miles per hour. Bonnet, who won last week's Coca-Cola 500 at Pocono, Pennsylvania, should give Baker all the competition he can handle. At the Alabama International Motor Speedway in Talladega, Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The delegation from the People's Republic of China is primarily interested in American seed processing techniques. Recently, the seed division of Ring Around Products of Montgomery bought the components for Chinese hybrid rice for use in this country and other parts of the world. Commercial hybrid rice is virtually unknown outside of China, and the Chinese say this discovery has increased their yields by 20%. In exchange, the company will sell the Chinese their know-how and technology of cotton hybrids. The Ring Around company has discovered the first successful hybrid cotton in the United States. Officials say the process strengthens cotton plants in the early growing stages and has the potential for large increases in yields. During their stay in Alabama, the Chinese will also tour the Blunt Agribusiness Group in Auburn and the Bush Hog Continental Gin in Prattville. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News. Senator Stewart says President Carter has recently signed into law the largest energy package in the history of this country. Stewart says it's not a perfect package, but he feels it will give some concrete solutions to the nation's energy problems.
This package attempts to deal with one of the biggest problems we've got in this country. We spent about $90 billion, or will this year, to import oil, and we got to do something about it. There's no sense in sitting around and wringing your hands and saying that we can't do anything about it. My feeling was that we ought to put something together.
Stewart says Alabama will benefit from the alcohol fuel package, which he and Senator Herman Talmadge of Georgia sponsored. He says there are already 4 federally funded projects in the state aimed at the development and expansion of alcohol-based fuels as an energy alternative. He says this is just a start, and Alabamians can expect to see more of these programs. Stewart says the state will also benefit through future plans to build a $1 billion synthetic fuel plant in North Alabama. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Get on the ladder, Curtis. Get on the ladder.
Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer says the celebration is the coronation of Bill Chandler, an ambassador for peace, friendship, and free enterprise. Members of the International Youth Camp, which Chandler began 17 years ago, set the theme for the celebration. Lions Club's youth from 15 nations met in Alabama for 6 weeks this year in an effort to promote peace throughout the world. Chandler became Lions International president July 1st. He became a Lion 32 years ago and served as the Montgomery Club president in 1964. He says he has a deep interest in youth because they are the future of the world. Chandler says among his goals as president of Lions International is an effort to strengthen the club's service.
We've used Helen Keller as kind of a symbol because her leadership inspired Lions throughout the world in 1925 to work with the blind and those who need eye care. One of her quotations that I like so much is when she said, while others were saying it couldn't be done, it was done. So my major goal will be to motivate people to do things that they think they can't do.
This is George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
1,300,000 Lions.
Language. The system is that the monies from the interesting historic statement of Bishop Parkinson, that I suppose we're unique in that industry, where the women...
That the meeting place will house at least 1,000 delegates. I was sent to the chairperson of the site committee, Mrs. Eva S. Holcomb, the ancestors Colder, president.
4 and the old 6, that's right, because you're reading 2 of them now, it's the old 6.
Members of the executive board of the Women's Home and Overseas Missionary Society. That's right, thank you. Dear bishops, general officers, presiding elders, and pastors of the African Methodist Episcopal, the hope of the society is that the meeting place 1,000.
The recall involves 1971 through 1978 Dodge vans and wagons with power steering, including Class C motorhomes and carry vans. If your van has a crack in the chassis, the Chrysler dealer will repair it by welding a rod to the chassis. Welding inspector Bob Lehman says the rod must be skip welded. What does the person look for to see that it's skip welded?
By looking at the round rod that's welded to the chassis and see that they welded on one side of it about 1.5 inches, and then right across from that welded another 1.5 inches on the opposite side. That's what is meant by skip welding. They don't weld the rod solid all the way along one side. They can look for where the ground is. This is very important on a vehicle of any kind. If the ground is not put very close to the welding area and isolated to what they're welding on only, then you will have an arcing across bearing surfaces.
Okay, what do you look for to see a ground? What is a ground and how do you recognize it?
The grounding shows that there will be where they clamp on a clamp, the grounding clamp, and it will show a little discoloration where it has arced across to seek a good ground.
Lehman says another sign of poor welding is marks where the welder has accidentally touched the electrode to a surface. How do you see that?
All right, by black discoloration, by melting, the melting of the iron like it has been done here in this case here. Now you can see here he had hit it here with an arc. He's hit up here with an arc. He's hit back up here with an arc. And here he struck an arc all the way along here. For some reason, I don't know why.
Lehman says it's important for customers to know whether a car dealer has an experienced welder on staff, but he says it's a good idea to check the job yourself after the repair has been made. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Census officials for this area are very secretive about the preliminary figures, saying they don't want to formally release the unofficial numbers. But I talked with Atlanta's district office, and they did confirm the preliminary county figures. Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer verified the preliminary population figure for the city. According to him, the city's 1980 population is just about where he thought it would be when city planners conducted an extensive housing survey 2 years ago. If the city figures prove accurate, it will show Montgomery's population increasing by more than 46,000 in the last 10 years. These numbers are subject to change because city planners are still working on Montgomery's newly annexed areas and aren't finished with census field work. But while they are preliminary figures, Mayor Fulmer says they track very closely with the city's own calculations.
What we have found is that basically by working together with the Census Bureau people that we don't have much to complain about. We think that their count is pretty accurate.
Preliminary figures for the county also show an increase, though not as dramatic as the city's. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
You may have noticed the added 4-cent gasoline tax already. Many stations pay for their gas according to how much they pump in a single month. Those stations added the 4 cents onto their prices this morning. Others pay for their gas by the tankful. Many of them are keeping prices down until they've sold all the gas they bought under the old tax rate. A random survey of 64 Montgomery area service stations indicates that a total of 88% of the stations surveyed have raised prices by 4 cents or intend to do so within the next few days. 2% of the stations say they have raised prices by less than 4 cents. 5% plan to hike prices but don't know how much. 2% say they will not raise prices at all because they want to bring in more business, and 5% say they don't know what they'll do. The large number of price hikes are contrary to what Alabama's House Speaker said would happen. When he was urging legislators to support the gas tax in January, he said the price of gas would not go up much because stations would want to remain competitive. Now a spokesman for the governor says he thinks prices will drop again and level out in a few weeks as stations compete for business. And besides, he says with the high price of gas, consumers will hardly notice the 4 cents additional tax. Other taxes due to rise tomorrow are so-called sin taxes. The liquor tax will rise another 10%, and there will also be an extra 25-cent charge on a pack of cigarette rolling papers. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
And we think ours are fairly accurate, and we have worked hard to make sure that they are. And we resent the fact that none of the southern mayors or representatives are invited to this meeting where they want to talk about just arbitrarily upping the figures in these large urban areas. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's basic fair play. And as I say, I wrote a letter protesting that fact.
Okay, you also said that the
as I read in press reports, that one of those bills would switch the PSC to an appointed commission, which might add many states have. Now, the governor has not made any determination on any of these recommendations, the dozens that are coming in from the departments, and the PSC is only one. And today was the deadline to receive those recommendations, and it's hardly possible to sift through all that information and come up with a call for the special session.
Very definitely so. In fact, Senator Kennedy is the only American that I know that the people of this country believe that can beat him. They are saying in no uncertain terms that President Carter cannot.
And Senator Stewart has done a good job, and he's a young man. He has a chance to build up a lot of seniority. He's electable, he's articulate, he's sharp, he's smart, and he votes right on many of the issues. Some issues he's voted on I haven't been pleased with, but overall, when you judge the whole man, he's been a good senator, and therefore our folks felt that we should re-endorse him.
This weekend's summer seminar is designed to give those junior miss officials on the county level a chance to talk with state officials. Those officials say junior miss is not a beauty pageant, but a scholarship program which recognizes a high school senior girl's overall scholastic achievements. Preliminaries for the national program start on the local level, with each county holding its own junior miss competition. Most of those programs are scheduled to be held in October and November.
What we're trying to do is to outline to our local programs what we're going to be doing in Alabama this fall and getting prepared for the state junior miss program. We outlined to them that we'll be having our state program the last week of January, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And we'll have an orientation for the girls coming to state in December.
One of the highlights of the seminar was a special appearance made by Alabama's junior miss Monique Key, who is the third runner-up to this year's America's Junior Miss. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
17-year-old J.B. Wiggs started playing pinball more than a week ago, playing in an effort to outlast the world record of 216 hours. Keeping that silver ball bouncing around all week became monotonous, but the goal kept getting closer and closer. There aren't many rules to breaking the Guinness Book of World Records at playing pinball. You just keep the ball moving. But J.B. can take 5-minute breaks each hour, or if she doesn't use that break, she can accumulate that time and add it to a later break. So far, we've talked only about her effort to break a world record, but that's actually not the entire story. JB wanted to do something to show that teenagers were more than lazy and prone to get into trouble. She wanted to do something that would draw attention to the fact that she wants to raise money for muscular dystrophy. Her goal of passing 216 hours happened just less than an hour ago. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
A noontime thundershower caused the race to start under the caution flag, which was a break for Richard Petty. Petty, still very sore from that neck strain suffered at Pocono last week, pitted on the second lap under the caution, turning his blue and red Oldsmobile over to Joe Milliken, who had qualified the car fifth. Richard wanted to sit in his car only long enough to maintain his Winston Cup point standings, and he did. When they reached racing speed, it was the old front-runner himself, Buddy Baker, leading the way, and he did for most of the first third of the race. But as so often happens, the big Talladega track, the high speed and the hot temperatures ate up his engine. Baker was gone on the 61st lap. Bobby Allison, ringleader of the Alabama gang, departed 16 laps before Baker, but the Alabama gang would be heard from later. At the two-thirds mark of the race, a huge roar went up. Hueytown, Alabama's good old boys were in front. Donnie Allison in the Rainey Chevrolet and Neil Bonnet in the Woods Brothers Mercury. 1-2, they were leading the race. But it lasted only a lap. Suddenly, Donnie Allison lost his engine coming out of turn 2. Joe Milliken, driving the Petty car, led for a time, but he too lost his engine to the high speed and the hot weather. In the 11-year history of the Talladega race, no driver has ever won it twice. Suddenly, the only one left was Darrell Waltrip, last year's winner, and just as suddenly, he was gone too. A caution flag with 10 laps to go turned it into a 5-car duel between Neil Bonnet, Cale Yarborough, Dale Earnhardt, Benny Parsons, and Harry Gant. Gant driving with a huge hole in his windshield, which ruined his chances. They turned them loose with 8 laps to go, and Yarborough jumped to the lead, looking to have the strongest car late in the race. But Neil Bonnet still had horsepower, and he took the Woods Brothers Mercury to the lead with 3 laps to go. He fought off Yarborough and Earnhardt in the next to last turn. And then coming down the short straightaway to the checkered flag, Earnhardt and Yarborough brushed each other trying to get around. Neil Bonnet was home, a winner. He called it his most satisfying victory because it came before the home crowd, easily the most partisan bunch of all the super speedways. Yarborough nosed out Earnhardt for second. This is Phil Snow reporting from Talladega, Alabama.
J.B. Wiggs began her assault on the pinball record of 216 hours last Friday night at 9:30. At 4 this afternoon when we caught up with her, J.B. was into her 162nd hour. If all goes well, the Jeff Davis High School senior-to-be will break the pinball mark Sunday night. Perhaps you're wondering why anyone would do this kind of thing.
Well, one thing, everybody's always putting down the teenager. The teenager is always the drunk driver who gets out and to do no good. And I'm just showing everybody that the teenager can put forth some effort in life. And I'd like to prove it by making a contribution to Jerry's kids, stricken people.
You don't get any rest at all.
Well, I get 5-minute rest per hour, but the best thing, well, what I've considered the best thing to do is to accumulate my hours so I can sleep, take showers, and whatever.
JB's friends say it has been hard trying to keep her awake, and why not after a week on her feet? JB's parents, Jerry and Bob Wiggs, make periodic visits. Friends Linda Mormon, Aretha Simonton, and others keep a close eye on her. JB's brother, 15-year-old Charles, who has been handling the daily increasing number of sponsors, took time out this afternoon for a brief nap. Record or no record, JB hopes to present Jerry Lewis with a nice check during his Labor Day MD telethon. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
You think
Mayor Fulmer says the city's 1980 population is just about where he thought it would be when city planners conducted an extensive housing survey 2 years ago. If the city figures prove accurate, it will show Montgomery's population increasing by more than 46,000 in the last 10 years. Preliminary figures for the county also show an increase, though not as dramatic as the city's. The numbers are subject to change when final tabulations are made, and Mayor Fulmer says he'll reserve the right to challenge the final figures if he detects a large margin of error. But Fulmer is already challenging a move by some urban area mayors to fudge or adjust population figures in order to receive more federal grants. The mayor has written a letter to the National Census Bureau protesting any massive adjustments to census figures.
We have done an accurate count in Montgomery with the Census Bureau and everybody working together with our planning department and Councilman Oliver, the complete count committee, and we think ours are fairly accurate, and we have worked hard to make sure that they are.
The mayor says he also resents the fact no Southern mayors were invited to a meeting to discuss the proposed change in census figures. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
First, I had to qualify through a local bowling tournament here at Bama Lanes. Then I won here and I went to the state playoffs at Montgomery Lanes, and I was fortunate enough to win there, and so now I get to go to Washington, D.C., bowl there. I was up there last year, and the competition was pretty tough, but not really as tough as I expected. I was expecting 200 average bowlers, and the highest average there was 194, so I think I have an excellent chance to win, especially since I was up there last year. I have a lot of experience that most of the other bowlers probably won't have.
Now, I don't think he's ever said that it should be appointed by him or that he has a preference, but some appointed commissioners I think he feels is desirable. And I think the bill that came up that first year we were here included appointment of some commissioners by him with approval of the Senate, which gives you checks and balances that you would need.
Five.